The problem with this is that the finance oligarchy of London and Wall Street cannot plan the world. They have no plan. They think they have a plan, but their plan contains boomerangs, unintended consequences. For example, the reason that they sent U.S. industry to China is simple greed, of this vicious greed that they have. It's the runaway shop. The logic of the runaway shop is you fire your workers here and you send it to China where you pay 25 cents an hour or whatever it is. But now the problem is that after 20 years of that, 30 years of that, since the days of Deng Xiaoping, China has now become a significant power. I would stress that the power of China is actually relative. It has to do with the industrial collapse of the United States, the relative deindustrialization of the European Union, and so forth. This makes the Chinese look like a big frog, you might say, in a small pond. In reality, they have tremendous weaknesses. They've got about, one half of the country, or 600 million, two-thirds of the country perhaps, are essentially poverty-stricken peasants in the interior, feeling very, very resentful about what their government is doing. But nevertheless, now, the Anglo-Americans, these wonderful guys who live from hand to mouth and are constantly obsessed with short-term speculative gain, they now realize that they're confronting a serious problem with China, that after all the era of the neocons and now the Obama bots, the Chinese are getting thoroughly riled up, especially by this latest arrogance with Google. Google is essentially an arm of the National Security Agency, right? When Google attacks you, it's the National Security Agency, it's the U.S. intelligence community. It is them. It's the rogue network running the show there. So Google is saying to China, we refuse to obey your laws. Now, for the Chinese, this goes back to what are called the unequal treaties, right? Since the British Opium Wars in 1840 to 1860, you had this stuff with treaty ports. In other words, foreigners had more rights in China than the Chinese did themselves. And the Chinese society went through a tremendous breakdown crisis. Now you get NSA Google acting in the way of a 19th century imperialist, saying, we demand immunity from your laws, we demand extraterritorial treatment, how dare you attack us? And, of course, the hypocrisy, as we all know...
Which is the same thing that the global corporations do in the West. They're all above the law, and we're being colonized and broken up into 10, 12 parts, just like China was. These are corporate fiefdoms.
But the Chinese have the advantage of seeing this as a foreign attack, and there's a huge nationalist movement in China, which is a problem for the government.
Now, I know, anti-New World Order stuff's really hot there. The best-selling books are about the banking cartel, the New World Order. So, are the communists turning against the people that put them in power? Are they even communist? We'll be right back with Webster Tarpley. We'll be right back, because we know the banks are the ultimate communist.
At work.
All right, we got phone calls coming up in the next segment with Webster Griffin Tarpley. I'm Alex Jones, 1-800-259-9231. Ladies and gentlemen, here is the secret documents. You can go up to Infowars.com. We have links to this document. U.S. intelligence planned to destroy WikiLeaks. And they were sent the secret NOFORN 32-page U.S. counterintelligence manual. And this is from February 2008. And they describe the Internet as an enemy weapons platform, as WikiLeaks, a terrorist group, insurgents. It says an online reference to foreign intelligence services, insurgents, or terror groups. And this is up on WikiLeaks. Now, what has WikiLeaks been releasing? 2 weeks ago, it came out in Utah that the Pentagon was watching U.S. citizens in non-terror-related cases. Illegal. WikiLeaks got documents. They confirmed they're real. WikiLeaks put out the White House memo, the Downing Street memo, that was released by MI6, where Bush was, in there, we got to fix the intelligence. We got to lie about WMDs. It's come out that Dick Cheney wanted to blow up U.S. ships and blame it on Iran. They hate this site. There's a lot of others that are doing it as well. But I noticed in New Zealand, when they started banning sites till people scream bloody murder, it was Infowars.com, PrisonPlanet.com, WikiLeaks. We don't even post these documents. I'm not getting into those waters. But we support those that do if it's exposing crime. And they're now saying that it's a weapon system. Here's the BBC. U.S. plans to fight the net revealed, and they're openly saying that they're building all these NSA centers to spy on everything the American people do without warrants. And we've got Cass Sunstein saying, get rid of the free internet. We have Wired Magazine headlines, cybersecurity ends open internet. Webster, I think people need to realize this is really happening. They're really preparing to censor the web. Why?
Desire of totalitarian figures like Cass Sunstein to impose what used to be called prior restraint. In other words, they would like to censor what you put up there before you can put it up. And, of course, prior restraint is totally alien to the American tradition. But the other side of it, of course, is cyber warfare. And I think this is maybe worth pointing out. You covered, of course, the CNN 2-hour special featuring all these 9/11 heavyweights and plug uglies a couple of weeks ago, which was the simulation of this big attack on the United States coming from Russia, China, and Sudan that eventually shut down the entire electrical system. I think there's a group in the Pentagon and the think tanks, and I'm looking especially at Yoda, Andrew Marshall, at the Office of Net Assessment in the Pentagon, the guy who actually controls the Pentagon Defense Science Board from behind the scenes. And they're gearing up for cyber hysteria, cyber warfare. And I think they have four things in mind. The first is total exaggeration of what can be done, right? They say, oh, a telephone virus can shut down the telephone system, you can shut down the airports, you can shut down the trains, you can shut down the power systems. As far as I can see, this is baloney, malarkey. It has never been done. And the sources for the idea that it could be done are the CIA on one side and the Wall Street Journal on the other. So the worst of the rogue network and the worst of the Wall Street gang. So I think people have got to realize this idea that you can, sabotage a nuclear reactor from afar with a virus through a computer is probably in the same league with Saddam's weapons of mass destruction or Tony Blair saying Iraq can strike London within 45 minutes. We remember all of this fantastic stuff. The other thing they try to do is to take the language of the Cold War and the language of nuclear confrontation and translate that into this new cyber jargon, right, of the computer age. Remember, deterrence, retaliation, first strike, second strike, counter value, counter force, all this stuff. They now translate that into computer talk so that you can think about this, right? And they're attempting to educate the public in the idea that this is possible, which, I think it's actually not.
And again, why would regional power grids be hooked to the internet? Why would nuclear reactors be hooked to the internet? I mean, obviously it's made up, it's exaggerated. That's admitted for anyone that knows any basics of computers. My IT guys say this is a complete joke.
Right.
But why would they? And clearly they're gearing up to launch a false flag against themselves right as they're trying to pass the cybersecurity takeover in the Senate.
I would actually call this virtual flag terrorism. This is the expression that I've tried to coin. Virtual flag terrorism. Because look at this wonderful advantage. Something happens, you can blame Russia and China, and how is anybody going to say, no, it's a lie, no, it's not true? They'll say the NSA has determined that this was this crash in the D.C. subway was actually caused from Beijing or Moscow or Irkutsk.
They could take a regular train derailment or a regular power outage and say that Americans did it or communists did it or the Keebler elves did it or the brain bug did it. We'll be right back.